the hearing. And after the lunch break, Ms. Clark, our next submitter.
Our next speaker is 3279 Judy Sargent on page 61.
Hello, Ms. Sargent. You're on mute there, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself.
Hello.
Hello, thank you very much. We can just see the top parts of your head. Up, perfect. That's better. Look, thank you very much. Thank you for waiting. We've got your submission. As with all of them, we've read them. So you've got 10 minutes, please, just to tell us what you want to get across. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody.
Hello.
I would just like to say that I did approve a couple of previous speakers. I've seen a little bit over the last day or two, Paul Robinson and Pam Douglas. I also come in as a show dog person and have been involved with the Cambridge Kennel Association and a big involvement with the West Highland White and Scottish Terrier Club. We have over 300 members in New Zealand. Now, 99.9% of that membership are pet owners, and they absolutely love having these dogs. And we arrange walks all over New Zealand in these groups, rural walks, Cornwall Park, gardens, etc., and lovely coffees afterwards. And the people absolutely enjoy this whole day. So I just feel like pedigree breeders in the past have liked the Waikato District Council a lot in the past. It's been known as a good place to rear your pedigree dogs. Pet dogs are important to people, so what we have bred have been very important. And so just trying to see, yeah. So pedigree dogs, and so I've had. That's right. So I have registered all my dogs with the council over the years. Now, I've heard a little bit about the dairy, about the farmers, and so I've decided to go back a little bit on my own personal life. I've been married over 50 years. I know I look pretty old these days. And I'm married to a dairy farmer in Taranaki, and in 1991, we came up and we moved to Eureka. And it was in my loneliness of having moved to a new area and I losing a pet unpedigreed dog that I got into some pedigree dogs and having them at home initially and then hitting into the show world. Well, I never knew what sort of a life I was going to get for the next 30 years with all the people I've met, all these fabulous people worldwide and in New Zealand. And I have invested a lot of money into my dogs over the years and have been rewarded with sending them overseas with great success. I've had them win in Japan, Hawaii, England, Europe, Czech Republic, you name it, they've been there. Not many, just a few, but they have done exceptionally well. So it's been big to me to breed sound dogs. And the biggest thing in the beginning is temperament, because if you keep something for show, the rest of the litter is going to go out into a pet home, most likely. So they have to mix well with children and people. And that's what we see in our big Westie and Scotty club. Now, being married to a dairy farmer, coming to Eureka, after quite a few years there, we were actually in a position of putting some people on to work. So we had to move. So I wanted to raise this with the council. We moved to Newell's Road. Now, I had a few more than 4 dogs, but I didn't have many. But we bought 12 acres. It was in the acres days with my head. And in that time, we had a well-operating airport, and we were not they were not allowed to build all closely under this flight path. So I thought buying this acreage, which went up a long drive and to a nice little piece of rural land at the back, to have my dogs away from neighbours was going to be a perfect spot. But what happened? The council changed the rules. You weren't allowed to have any subdivisions, and suddenly they changed the rules and everything started to subdivide. So, not wanting to cause problems with anybody or people, I took a proactive thing and talked my husband into buying a property out on the Gordonton Road. We were nearly to the new roundabout at Taupri. We're a long way out on the Gordonton Road. So for nigh on 18 years, I had another friend that lived in another house, and we bred and showed West Highland White and Scottish Terriers. The funniest thing that happened in those years was having someone come. We occasionally groomed someone else's dog. And this lady came and she said, I had such trouble finding you. And I said, why? And she said, I went into a neighbour and said, is there some dogs around here? And they said, there's no dogs around here. So we were obviously not being any problem to neighbours. So we moved on once again, and I decided that now I'm in my 70s, that it was time for me to downsize, and I am very realistic about what I can do and how many dogs I can look after really well. And my husband and I would like to do a little bit of travel. So anyway, this COVID thing came in and put all of us in a bit of a predicament, and we're trying to find a rural property, having had no problem selling what we had. So I found a property in Te Kowhai. I definitely checked that it was rural. I have good dogs, but I am very aware of not being a nuisance to someone else. So I checked that it had a full rural, whatever you call it. So I moved into this new property. Well, my goodness, didn't I run into a trouble? I have a neighbour who I have barely spoken to the lady for half a minute out of a car window, who has complained constantly to the council. And I was absolutely blown away to have these councillors, dog control people turn up on my doorstep and said, we've had complaints about your dogs. And then they started to woof, woof. And I said, I will come and see. So I took them through my backyard down to this beautiful accommodation that my dogs have. And they were blown away. These girls came through and said, oh my goodness, and squatted down on this lovely paved area, which has a portico thing over the top so they don't get wet, which goes into a 7 by 6 metre fully lined the half they have as a day play area, and then they can go out to 2 paddocks. So they squatted down with my dogs and looked left and said, oh my goodness, what a beautiful paddock. And I said, oh, and that one over there. And these are both fenced, and they've got colour steel, and they can't see through at things. So anyway, they sat down and went away and said, I can see, because I was in my old home clothes, that you're mostly a home person. And I said, yes. And they said, well, your dogs would not be barking all day. I said, never. I said, they will occasionally do a little yap yap when someone comes, but that is a total dog role. So I thought all was fine, but I was shocked, because the last time I had a visit from the council was like 18 years ago, when they came to my new property at Gordonton, and they took all these photos of it and said, this place is amazing. We might want to use this in our advertising on how people should keep their dogs. So consequently, I was very shocked And then to make it worse, about a month or so later, I have another lot of dog control people come. And they were a different couple. And again, they was totally blown away. And the man said, oh, I've even been sitting out on the road. And let me tell you, that Horatu Road, the traffic is so noisy and the trucks, I can't believe it. And your dogs are no problem. So, okay, so the dogs got the big ticks and they have not been back to me about the dogs. But the problems have got bigger. The lady then started complaining about anything else we did on our property. My husband had applied for a renovation of our house and to put on a, what do you call it? Oh, you used to call it a granny flat, but a dwelling for somebody else. And so then she started complaining where we had a container holding stuff. And the man at the council, not the dog control, the other ones, were hassled so often by this lady that they asked us before Christmas, could you just move it a few more feet away from the boundary? Now, it wasn't illegal. It was totally allowed. So my biggest point I want to make to you is to please not give neighbours too much control.
So, Ms. Sargent, thank you very, very much. I'm afraid your time is up, but I think you got your points across there very well. So thank you very much for taking the time to put your submission in and to explain it to us. Thank you. We appreciated that.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Ms. Clark, we have Mr. Holst.
So the next submitter that was due to speak, 2300 Catherine Foster, she has just notified that she doesn't want to speak to her submission anymore.
Right.
We do have the next submitter in the waiting room.
Thank you very much.
That is
that's Richard Holst.
Yes, submitter 2290 Richard Holst on page 297.
G'day, Richard here.
I'm sorry, you were disguised as a councillor in the middle of all of that. Welcome, and I think I have the whole screen full of people. Thank you very much for your submission. As I've mentioned before, we have read all the submissions. Appreciate that you've taken the time to put one in, and the next 10 minutes are all yours just to give us the highlights that you want us to recall. Thank you.
Yeah, g'day. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm assuming you can all hear me.
Absolutely.
You're not worried if you don't see me, that's fine.
We can see you.
Yeah, after reading the proposal, and I do stress I do understand it is a proposal, it is not set in stone at this time, despite some of the rhetoric I've been seeing on Facebook and Informed. It's going through it, looking at the research. I actually asked for some information myself, which wasn't replied to, but it was replied to another member of the Facebook group. And potentially it goes around the basis for the decision making being because of, as was stated, multiple complaints about poor dog owners in the rural area. Once the information was provided, it shows that it was actually disproportionate to the number of owners that are within there. In fact, it actually shows that you had, I'll just bring it up on my screen. I believe it was 58 complaints over 5 years, to affected to 156 dogs. And in fact, they were actually only on 7 properties. So considering the number of rural dog owners that there actually are within the region, which is considerable, even if you take farmers out, it does show that it's fairly disproportionate, and the information provided about the reasoning behind it is not sound in making a decision based on that. I mean, statistically, you're probably talking less than 0.02% of dog owners within the rural area from basic figures you've provided. You already have a avenue within the Dog Control Act and also within your actual bylaw, which is to do with infringements, which you've actually applied to a few people for actually failing to take care. On a separate side note and decision on there, the infringement being $300 is insignificant. And obviously there is something you would need to look at there as to whether that infringement needs to be, first of all, made much stronger and how it is then applied. With that also, there is the opportunity to also develop a better relationship with the compliance organisations, which are for animal welfare, which is, of course, SPCA and MPI. MPI do get involved with animal welfare, especially with things like puppy breeders and so on, and they have been taking a more active role, especially in the Waikato region and the Southern Auckland region over the recent past. As to comments made by some members of the Huntly Community Board stating that they'd actually signed off on multiple cases of needing inspectors to be able to go into properties. That is not borne out by the information provided. And in fact, it would appear that it is to do with residential or country living properties. I do note, looking at other areas within the North Island, that there are, for the most part of the North Island, there are no restrictions on the number of dogs on rural properties. There is a couple of exceptions where they state that if any property under 2 hectares requires a permit for more than 2 dogs. But I believe it's only Taranaki South that have got that there. Also, this proposal, this is not a new one. This is in fact the 4th time since approximately 2004, 2005 that this proposal has been mooted. The final time it was actually, it was 2007, it was discounted and it was not followed through. As I said, it was unpopular and basically was not reasonable, was the decision as to why the council has actually decided, the chief executive at that stage backed down on it. In my case, I do have the question of, if that's already had it, this is now the 4th time, why is there even a 4th time? We've had 3 times it's been shown it was not supported by fact. Why are we going there again? As a dog owner, I do have 5 dogs on a property, a rural property. My nearest neighbour is approximately 200 metres away on one boundary. Next nearest property to me is about a K as the crow flies. So I do have dogs. 4 of them are working dogs. 1 is a retired pest control dog, gun dog. But there is nothing to say that in the future I may not wish to actually go back into actually having, for example, German Shepherds or Belgian Shepherds for man work and also detector dog work, and potentially for breeding from them for those reasons. I have actually been a detector dog handler in the past and may look at moving into contract work with that in the future. In those cases, yes, they're a working dog, but they're not fully under your definition of what is a farm dog and having farmers exempted. In my case, I would have, where I live, no potential impact on neighbours as such. So apart from that, that's about where I've got. So I'm ready for any questions you guys want.
Mr. Holst, that's really interesting. Thank you very much. And you did make a point at the beginning, just before I go to see if there's any questions. You made a point, and I thank you for picking up on it. This is a draft, so we put out for consultation in the draft format, and you're quite correct. This feedback by way of submissions goes towards informing what we do in our final bylaw as it comes out. So you've made some really good points. You've also made some good points that haven't been covered in other submissions, so that's helpful. Are there any questions for Mr. Holst? No, it would seem not. I think you've made your points perfectly clearly, and thank you for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you very much.
Right, see you later.
Bye-bye. Ms. Clark.
Next speaker is 2933, Kim Orlando Reap, on page 216.
Thank you very much. Hello, Ms. Orlando Reap. You need to unmute yourself, please. That is perfect. And we heard the cough. Look, thank you very much. As I've said to the other submitters, we appreciate that you take the time to do this. We've read your submission and your attachment that you had to it as well. Please take the next 10 minutes to tell us what the highlights are and what outcomes you want us to consider.
Well, I'm originally from the UK, but I've lived in New Zealand now for nearly 40 years. I run a dry stock farm of about 450 acres in the North Waikato in partnership with my son. For most of the years I've lived here, I've worked full-time on the property and had my own team of working dogs. My hobbies are all dog related. I've been involved with dogs for my whole life in various dog activities. I was breed rescue officer for the Road Use and Ridgeback Association for many years, and I currently administer a Facebook page called Nurture New Zealand, which is solely for the purpose of improving care and knowledge of the breed and finding homes for litters bred by other people or older dogs abandoned in the town. I've been and am on many dog sport and breed committees and currently president and training coordinator at Country Agility. I'm also an official measurer for Dogs Agility New Zealand. I have been instructing since 1994, and a lot of this training involves dealing with various general problems such as poor recall or aggression to other dogs. Handlers who attend classes acquire many different skills for controlling their dogs, and their dogs become better behaved and socialised as a result. I'm submitting really from the angle of someone involved in organising and running dog clubs and events, meeting all sorts of dogs and their owners. I was slightly appalled that the proposed new regulations should come up now, especially at the time when many people are suffering from mental issues because of COVID, and dogs are frequently their only form of solace. One of the benefits of agility is enrichment for both dog and handler, building a unique relationship and taking part in a sport which is recognised worldwide, and which includes people from all walks of life who would not usually take part in any other sport or physical activity. Not only is it physically beneficial, but it also provides people and dogs with social interaction. If competitors are limited to two dogs, they are going to miss out on many competitions, as the dog's competing life is from 18 months to 8 or 9. The dog may then live for another 5 or 6 years if well looked after, and people are not going to get with their old dogs. Most people run at least 2 or 3 dogs, as this makes the sport more financially viable and available to more people. It also gives incentive to exercise, which has proved to be beneficial both mentally and physically. Currently, there are 533 agility dogs in the Waikato area, and at least another 100 or so under 18 months. These are registered for agility, so that's at least 632 dogs that are well trained and under control. Many need to be off lead for exercise and using council parks for training, especially dogs from urban homes who have little garden space. There are many, many other dogs competing in obedience, nose work, dock diving, agility and sled racing, whose numbers haven't even been added. Then there are the responsible breeders who have dedicated their lives to their breed and need to keep several dogs in order to preserve the quality and health of their lines. Bringing in the 2-dog policy is literally going to ruin people's lives and cause endless mental pain and frustration. I would like to know why responsible owners are being punished for the actions of irresponsible people. Councillors are elected to represent the people who voted for them, carry out their wishes and uphold people's rights. Many, many people move to lifestyle blocks. They may have multiple dogs, often saddling themselves with large mortgages. It's hardly fair to change the rules in these own properties for no reason other than to bring in new draconian laws, which will mostly affect responsible owners and do nothing to solve the current problems. It seems that other councils are much more dog friendly. I visited the Groynes Dog Park on Christchurch Ring Road, which is a wonderful facility with many varied areas and obstacles for enrichment. I've also been told that Fiacco Council offers discounted fees to members of Dog New Zealand and affiliated clubs. It would seem to be a much better option to encourage responsible owners and concentrate more effort into dealing with owners already identified as causing the problems. I also believe that most councils allow unlimited dogs in rural areas.
Thank you. That was very, very clear. Are there any questions for Ms. Orlando Reep? No, I think you're resonating what a lot of people have said, and I thank you for taking the time to put in your submission. There appear to be no questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark, I think there is nobody in the waiting room?
I believe there is now. I think Jenny's in there.
Correct. Right.
Yeah. So next submitter is 2668 Jenny Terrace, page 276.
Hello, Ms. Terrace. We can see you, and now you've taken yourself off mute. Well done. Thank you.
Camera.
Right.
I have
Your hands on the camera.
It is not.
Right, just you want to sort out your moving problems there. You're fine. We can see you.
I've got this wonderful helper to one side.
It's always good to have a wonderful helper.
Yes.
No, look, we can see you. We can hear you. And thank you for taking the time to put in a submission. We have read it, and take the next 10 minutes and let us know what are the things that are important to you and what you want us to consider as the highlights. Thank you.
Well, my main important thing is that the number of dogs you're allowed to keep. I live on a 10-acre block, and I like, well, dogs are a big part of my life, and a lot of people do wonderful things with their dogs too, like visiting hospice and reading with children and doing all sorts of things. And just to be stuck with 2 dogs is not the best. But my idea was that along with registering the dogs, to register the owners and keep an eye on how well they do look after their dogs, etc. But to get a special owner's permit, you'd have to do things like do a dog obedience course, and not just one, do beginners, intermediates and advanced. And the dog ranger will come around and have a look at your section and make sure it's all fenced off so the dogs can't wander, and also check where the dogs are going to sleep and live in the kennels, and just get the owners to do a little quiz on how to look after dogs in dogs law. And I also think it's a really stupid idea to get people to get permission from the neighbours to have an extra dog. I can see that causing a lot of strife, because like if your neighbour said no, yeah, cause a lot of trouble in the neighbourhood, I think. And basically it's the dog obedience side of things, making sure people get to know what they've got. I used to teach dog obedience classes years ago at the Hamilton Dog Obedience Club, and the number of people that rocked on up to my beginner class and they had no clue what the dog was bred for that's on the end of the lead. And I think education in dog obedience classes is just so important, and it would show up the good dog owners and the bad dog owners. And the other thing the council could look at monitoring a bit more is backyard dog breeders. That's the real bad thing that's happening. And I get people want to make money, and they might think it's an easier way, but there's so many jolly dreadful crossbreeds and things turning up, and it seems to be staffies and pit bulls and that sort of genre that are ending up in the pound. So yeah, that's my say. Probably won't take 10 minutes up.
That's perfectly fine. I just wanted to ask you about your backyard dog breeders, if you would think they would be necessarily rural, or are you thinking that they are perhaps wandering dogs that have accidentally created more dogs?
Well, my recent 5 years ago experience was I went to what I thought was a breeder to buy a dog, and when I got there, she wouldn't let me look at the kennels. She wouldn't let me do this, that, and the other, but I didn't take that and had a good look. I was going to walk away and not get a dog, but she got me to sit in this pen on a bucket with all the puppies. And one of them climbed up into my lap. So that was the end of that. And I knew it was going to be difficult. And it has been difficult for 5 years. She's so nervous. And I took her to dog obedience classes for 2 years. But I stopped because I got ill, and I got fed up with cleaning my car every Sunday because she kept throwing up. But this woman is just churning out puppies and selling them, and she's not socializing them. They had no toys, so the things they played with were clumps of dirt, which is just great when you cop that through the lounge. She was not vaccinating the puppies, and the way she was feeding them, she was just putting piles of food in the pen twice a day. And when I got my puppy home, it took a couple of weeks before she could run further than 2 meters and lie down. That's the sort of breeding I'm talking about. She was doing it for the money. She didn't care. And the word gets around. She doesn't live in the Waikato district. So
I think your fatal flaw was sitting down in a pen full of puppies myself.
Yeah, I know. A bit of a sucker. But that's the sort of breeding I'm talking about. And I have run into a family member that got this cute little crossbreed, and she was going to breed it and have lots of puppies. And I did a lid and shut it down. It was just too cruel. Right. And, people are doing that, and they have no idea what they're creating. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Terrace? No. Look, thank you very, very much. That was a very personalised submission, and I thank you for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. Bye.
Ms. Clark, how are we going?
I don't believe the next speaker is in the waiting room yet. And we've tried finding her, but we get no response.
Okay, so, right, so the next one is Mr. Whittock at 2:10. So I suggest that we take a break and come back in time to start at 2:10. 2:10? Yes, 2:10. Thank you, everybody.